Hello there and welcome back to my YouTube channel. James here as ever for today's very important video all about how to pass your upcoming PM exam. I presume that's why you've clicked on this video. Well, today I'm speaking with lovely Jo, who is a current PM tutor with loads of years of experience in the accountancy profession, teaching management accounting. So Jo, feel free to introduce yourself to everyone listening.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's great to be here with James. I'm very excited to talk about PM today and how you're going to pass it.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, that's why they've clicked on the video today, Jo. So we're going to go through 3 top tip areas along with our insights of all of our experience. But just so the viewers know who you are, Jo, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, I've been teaching for over 15 years now and basically started in the traditional audit for Arthur Andersen way back in the distant past. I know I look old, so I might as well put it out there. And then I moved into a management accounting role for a major supermarket. Absolutely loved it. That's where my love for management accounting came. I was financial planning controller, doing lots of things like forecasting, budgeting, looking at KPIs, basically driving the business forward based on, being a business partner, and absolutely loved that role. Then I moved into mergers and acquisitions. So worked at Intel for a couple of years and looking at integrations and using my project management skills. But while doing all that, I've obviously had to teach, mentor, etc. And then I decided to move into teaching. Absolutely loved, started with AAT and moved into ACCA. And that's really what I've been doing for quite a few years now.
Wow, you see, that is lovely stuff for the viewers to hear, especially if they've got their PM exam, because you've got all that experience and that knowledge as well that is going to help them with those tips we're going to run through today. So what I've done for you is I've put Jo's details in the description below, so feel free to get in touch. She's a PM tutor at the moment, and we're going to run through some of those top tips now, aren't we, Jo? So
yeah, definitely. I mean, my major thing about PM is that you have to love it. You have to really get into it and have to really relate it to real life, and then it becomes that exam that you're going to pass first time. Don't treat it as a chore doing all these exercises. Make sure you sort of think, oh, how can that work in real life? Let's look at a real life example. And that's kind of how I do my teaching.
nice.
But I suppose my first major pitfall, shall we say, that's my top tip, is to avoid the pitfalls. That's my first top tip. And I've got 5 little pitfalls which I think students think PM is all about. It's thinking the exam is all about numbers. No. No. It's definitely not all about numbers. Just because you like manipulating those numbers, you like doing those calculations, doesn't mean you're going to pass this exam. It's 50% written and 50% calculation. Now, of course, the written bit is more about doing some MCQs which are discursive. It's not actually writing. So 50% of it is understanding assumptions behind models, etc. But please don't go into this exam thinking, oh, it's a numbers exam. I love numbers, because that you're going to be sadly not passing if you take it that way. And I think the other thing, one of the other pitfalls is that people tend to just say general points. I'm sure that comes up in lots of
Oh yes, quite a lot, but especially here.
Yeah, I'm like, they're going, stop just writing down general points. The whole point of this exam is there's a scenario to use, and they need to be related to the scenario. The other thing that students tend to think, oh, it's 60% MCQ. If I can just get all those MCQs done, I'll pass. No. Yeah, let's work it out. We're your accountants here. 50, if you want to get 50 marks out of 60, that's 83%. You're doing well. If you get 83%, that's prize winner. Like, you're not going to pass in the MCQs, basically, only. You've got to focus on that section C technique.
I agree.
And they also go, oh, I don't have to plan when I go to section C. I'll just get straight on with it. Absolutely not. You need to look at that question, work out where the marks are. You need to plan your approach. Planning up front for, say, at least 5 minutes, if it's a long question, will pay dividends later on. And so
Completely agree
And I
with you.
think, they think they're in an applied skills. It's not a strategic paper. Why do I need to plan? Absolutely not. It's all about that planning in section C. And then the one that really I get time and time again, which questions are coming up, Joe? Which ones are you going to, what are you predicting is going to come up? I'm like, how can I predict that? Oh, this syllabus is huge. It's huge syllabus. And they time and time again, the ACCA have drummed it into students, and they just want those tips. And it's like, it's not going to happen. If you wish for a variances question, you won't get it. If you've just got to do the whole syllabus. One student came out of the exam last year and said, I can't believe it. They gave me a whole section C question on not-for-profit. That's like 6 pages in the textbook. I know.
Yeah.
I know. But you've got to be able to cope with it.
Cover it all.
So you can't question spot, and you shouldn't even try. So I think my first top tip was avoid the pitfalls. What about you, James? What do you think?
Well, I was going to say, I didn't mention it at the start, but pen and paper at the ready for things to get down from today's talk. I think this is also a really good chance for us to actually go on about the actual pass rate for PM. So walk us through it, Joe, from your experience.
Well, looking back over the years, I think it's always been quite low, but there was a real low point last year, just as COVID hit, actually. It was March 2020, the pass rate was 35%. I mean, we're on par with audit, basically. And the reason audit is quite low is the writing skills. The students don't get those writing skills done. But I think with them PM, I think it suffers from the fact that people want it to be their first exam. So, we used to be F1, F2, F3, F4, which was law. And they're the sort of the on-demand exams. And then we get into the sessional exams. And of course, PM is F5. So, okay, let's just do F5 first then. It's the order. That's what the ACCA say. That's what we need to do. And actually, it's their first exam. They don't realise the step up that's required. The dedication, you do your lecture, you go through the textbook, but you need to do a lot more home study. You need to do a lot more question practice. And I think PM suffers from that because it's the first exam most people take. And then they fail, or they a near fail, or, they may just pass. And then they realize, oh my gosh, I really do need to step the game up and raise that level. So I think it does suffer from being the first exam that people take.
Completely agree with you. And the standard that it goes up as well, compared to, we've got the business technology, you've got management accounting, financial accounting, then you go to PM, you can definitely see the difference in it. And I can see why students struggle on it, especially with it being 50-50 narrative to actually computations as well. So yeah, I think really, really good point there. First one to get down, and we're going to come on to many more, so make sure you're getting these down, guys, as well. But Joe, what else are we thinking for our top tip number 2 that the viewers are really going to benefit from?
Well, basically, it's the CBE practice platform. I can't repeat enough that you do need to get on that quite early on. Especially now with the remote invigilation exams, it's even more important to get that practice. And if your tuition provider is not showing you how to use that, then that is something that you need to focus on trying to get some help. I mean, my top tip is, there's this video on the ACCA on how to use the scratch pad for sections A and B. And when you go through the questions, throw that piece of paper away, get rid of that pen, sit there and really try and use that scratch pad. Yeah, focus. It will pay dividends. It gets much easier. I mean, I'm an old teacher like me, doesn't like typing. I'm not very good at typing. A lot of my students will tell you when I was been showing them how to do question practice, it's like, oh, sorry, there's another typo. Don't worry about that typo. The ACCA don't see typos. But, it's just practicing. And I'm sure because they're young, they're quick, they can certainly use that scratch pad quite easily.
Yeah.
I think also it's realizing there's a second calculator that you've got your first calculator that you can use and take in, although I've been seeing that on local media, social media, that some people haven't been able to use some of their calculators.
Mm.
So that's a bit of a stress. So make sure that you can use the online calculator as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
And a top tip really for me, if you are in remote invigilation, you've got your one calculator and the online calculator, and you've got those complex questions, like a throughput question gets to be quite complex. You can use both. So you do one calculation in the one calculator, one calculation in your own calculator. You then don't have to write it down in the scratchpad, which you realize takes time. And
Yeah.
you take one away from the other, there's your answer. So it's just getting canny at it. Yeah.
It's going to take practice as you go through. I've had a go at the system, and it's amazing how much you have to concentrate. And when I was doing it, I went, "Oh my word! I can see where students make a lot of mistakes on this, because if you just misread the question slightly or don't quite understand what it's asking for, oh, you can go off on a complete tangent, get the wrong answer down, and in some cases not even get the right working process on there as well, I would say."
Yeah, so when they released the latest sample questions, one of them was called Health Nuts, and they didn't release any answers to us tuition providers. We were able to do it on our Test Reach platform at FME. And I sort of sat down and thought, right, I'm just going to have a go at this to time. My goodness, you know, it is practice. I mean, I just about did it in time, but that was because I think if I'd had a pen and paper, I'd have done it a lot quicker. But only because I'm you know, not as au fait with typing. I don't touch type. I never did, and so I need to learn, really, I suppose. But you know, at my age, it's a bit late, I think.
It will come with practice for the viewers out there as well. But
So,
these are all resources, and it's just going to come with practice. Sit yourself down, and I always find from my experience as well, when you're on a computer and you're having to do these CBE practice questions, get rid of all the notifications that come up on your laptop. Put your phone away as well, so that you're fully focused on it in front of you, and clear as many distractions as possible, because that should be your sole focus, and then you should see improvement as a result. I don't know if these are the sort of tips you tell your students.
Yeah, no, I basically say to them, you know, you've got to split your screen, even if you're not using the platform and you're going to use a word processor or a spreadsheet tool. You've got to just split. You've got to get used to seeing that question. And it's also good. They love their textbook and they love their hard textbook and their hard kit. But, you know, get hold of an online version so it can be put up there. So when you're doing questions, you just really make sure you're doing as much in the exam format that you can do. What looking at it on a screen. I mean, a practice platform, there are those blank workspaces, so you can there's no excuse, you can use them. And also a top tip was you can actually copy and paste from the scenario in section C into the word processor in Excel. And there's different ways of doing it, by the way. Did you know this, James? If you're on Excel, there's a different way of doing it than if you're on the processor. So, sorry, I should say spreadsheet. And so I've done a quick video, which is on my YouTube channel, which shows them how to do that for PM questions. Because actually you can get a whole table straight away into the spreadsheet, and especially if you're doing those ratio questions, you know, all those numbers are in there, and then you can quickly manipulate them to, you know, as we all say, make sure you give relevance to a number. So you need to obviously therefore calculate the ratios, the change and things like that, and it's just much quicker, basically.
Nice. I've got a question though. I know practice is going to come from it, but a question I always get all the time is, James, what should be my strategy for the PM exam? Should I do section A first? Should I do section C first? What do you usually advocate for your students?
Well, I usually advocate settling yourself.
Okay.
So I think most people feel settled if they get the section A done. They feel settled, yeah, because it's short little questions. There may be some harder ones that you can't do. It's going to take time, but it generally settles you. But one thing, you know, which is my second tip. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But so I would definitely say do section A, because I think you'd feel more settled. There'll definitely be questions you can do and you'll think, oh, I've done that, and give it at the time it deserves. And then I think, you know, move to section C, because what I don't like is people get to the end of doing section B and they haven't given section C enough time, because section C is where you really pass the exam. Because I do think it's quite hard to get over half marks on the MCQs. You might be on the cusp, you know, you may get 40. That's brilliant if you get 40 out of 60. Yeah. If you're getting 30, you know, that's obviously a pass of section A and section B. But you know, you then need at least, you obviously then need 20 on section C. So you just need to give that section C the time it deserves.
Oh yeah.
And therefore, if I would do that in the middle section where you feel a bit brighter about it, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. But time management on there as well is another key factor. But talk us through your tip 2 then as well.
Tip 2 is basically exam technique. It's all about sectioning that exam. So I did say start with section A, but you know, this whole 1.8 minutes a mark, I'm very focused on the fact that section A is the small questions, 2-mark questions.
Yeah.
And I think we could give that 50 minutes. Now, normally you should be giving it 54. Okay. Right. But I think you can give that 50 minutes, because what happens with those MCQs is there's some calculation ones. And what I don't want you to worry about is if those calculation ones take more than 3.6 minutes, because see it as a 50-minute block to do those 15 questions. And so you'll save time on the more discursive questions, because you can either see it or you can't. It's definitely going to take less than 3 minutes, isn't it? So still make sure you give it that time. But one thing that came out from the ACCA is they are definitely seeing a trend in people completing those MCQs too quickly and at the expense of performance. Yeah. So some people probably would complete them in potentially 30 minutes, which is just too quick. And the reason they're doing that is they're falling for the distractors. Those distractors, you know, time and time again, I see it. You know, I set questions for homework without any answers and the MCQs, and they send them to me. And I just say, right, fallen for the distractor. You just didn't go far enough in the calculation. So I've go back to students and say, from exam technique point of view, when you're doing your questions now for section A and section B, because it all applies to the same, is look for the distractors as well as the answer, and understand why the distractor is there, because you're more likely to see it in the real exam then and go, I've seen the distractor, I'm not going to pick it, I'm going to go a bit further. Yeah.
Or almost saying how that can't possibly be right on there, or what on earth are they going on about here? So you're even narrowing it down as well, which is really good.
Yeah. So, you know, it would be nice, but it's not going to happen, that you could get 1 mark for the distractor, you know, the nearly right answer, but unfortunately that's not going to happen.
Well, it's time pressured enough as well. Lots of students who come to me and drop me a message, whatever it may be, they say, oh, I spend far too long on section C. And then I completely agree with you, rush through section A, and they don't have a sort of time management plan, so that it's being really critical on yourself to say, look, 50 minutes, as you said, for section A, I have to move on to section B, because if I only attempt, and someone messaged me, I've got to tell you about this, they only did about 80 to 85 marks of it going through, they thought. So I just went to them, if you're only doing 80 marks of the whole exam, you've got to get 50. So you get 50 out of 80. Well, why don't you time it right and get a chance of doing, you know, do all 100 and then just get 50 out of that? Oh, amazing. Oh, dear.
Yeah, so I mean, I would be, you know, section A 50, and at section B, I go for 55 more. And the reason that's a case is because you have to read those cases. You have to read them all the way through. Although it's normally, it goes chronologically with the questions. So you've got 1 to 5, and you can normally go through and go, oh, that's bits for that question, question, and that question. But you do have to read it through, because guess what's sometimes at the bottom? It's the number of days in a year are 360 and not 365. You know, and if you don't spot it, you get the question wrong. Or the inflation rate is there and you're scrambling around, where's the inflation rate? You know, if you don't read all the way down, you may miss some general information at the bottom which relates to all the questions.
Yeah. along with the time pressure of going through in the situation as well. So again, it's just relaying that if you don't do, put it this way, if you don't do a computer-based exam before the performance management exam, in my eyes, you're at a severe disadvantage. And the
Yeah.
more practice you're going through it, the more mistakes you make, the better off you're going to be, I would say.
I think when I was doing my exams, I learnt more from my mistakes than I did from getting something right, because you just remember them. Like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. And so it's great to make mistakes, just great, but not on the exam.
No, yes. It's like before a recording. Surely before this we don't make mistakes, but that's a whole different matter. But what are we thinking for tip 3 then? What are you going to talk us through?
Well, tip 3 is writing skills. And I think this applies to not just PM, but in particular it applies to PM, because I have knowledge of the other exams, and I just think that PM it's a real focus that you have to have. I mean, I think audit is probably the other one, which is the writing skills.
Yeah.
But what I just time and time again, students in the section C, they go, right, that they know the answer. I know they know the answer. So the classic one is they just don't explain their points fully. So I'll go back to the points thing as well. I mean, obviously, if you've got 6 marks, what does that mean, James?
I think we're going to have to write about 6 points probably for this. Yeah.
It's not rocket science, is it? It's not rocket science. And so when I see a student give me 3 points, then, they obviously think it's 2 marks for 3 points. But if there's 6 points there and it's a very open, you've got to try and find 6 points for 6 marks, haven't you? So the writing skills, going back to the writing skill point, they just don't explain their points very well. So my top tip is to always think to yourself, I'm explaining this to a child, and the child is always saying to me, but why? But why? and so, and I don't understand, but why? And that's where you've got to think the marker is the child. They need it explaining to them.
Right. I see where you're coming from.
Just because they're an accountant doesn't mean to say that it's been, they'll understand the answer.
That's a really good point on that. I like that. Yeah. That's really good.
So this is my question to you. It says, so one of the questions that will be is, what is an advantage of incremental budgeting? Right? What is an advantage of incremental? So answer that comes out, because you've learnt it. It's quick. Oh, okay. Yes, that's right. It is quick. Okay, but you're not going to get the mark unless it's why. Why is it quick? And it's because you just take the reliable figures from last year and you apply an inflation uplift. 1 mark. Yeah. So you can't, you're not going to get that mark by just saying it's quick. The other classic one, they say it's easy. Okay. Well, but okay, so I'm a child, but why is it easy? And it's easy because it's a simple way of budgeting, because you literally are taking one figure and applying an inflation rate, and a junior accountant is able to do that. They don't need training in the same way you would with something like zero-based budgeting. It's just adding that add value.
I completely agree. And the other thing that comes up in section C, I find, is that the key words in the requirement. So you may have to relate your point back to profitability or efficiency, something on those lines. So exactly the same thing. Make your point and then say, does it make us more efficient? Does it make us more profitable? And that's the tick. That's the difference for me in a failing student and a passing student who refers to those key buzzwords in the requirement.
Yeah, I think it's really sad when you I've marked performance evaluation questions especially, and they've given me the sales turnover's gone up by 10%, and then they've said that is good, and it's just like, I can't give you the mark. I can't give you, because you've got to say why it's gone up. Even if you can't find it in the scenario, you've got to infer, well, the reason it's gone up, it could be because of the sales price going up, or could be because of volume has increased. But, you know, in performance evaluation questions, that will be in the scenario somewhere. It's you know, they're not going to leave you hanging. So you just basically calculate, put it into perspective, and then you need to state the implication, which is the why, and then the marks just flow.
Yeah, it should do. And the other key thing to help with a student's writing capabilities and to understand the scenario, I find, is if you actually start to write down the company's name or the individual's name, then you start to think about, I can understand that company is doing this. And if they do this, this is going to happen. And then it perfectly links onto your point there, Joe, as to, well, why is that happening? Is this a good or bad thing for them as well?
Yeah, that's great. I've forgotten that. I do say that as well. If you write down the person's name, the company's name in your answer, then the marker can be fooled. Oh, they're really trying to apply it to the scenario, aren't they? You know, so you get away from those general points, don't you?
I think it's a little thing I picked up in when I did my ACCA exams. Just writing down the company's name, as I said, or the individual, whatever the scenario is. It really focuses your mind to sort of think in that perspective and relate it back to them as well. It makes such a difference. And I found the quality of my answers went up a lot better as well, rather than saying it would affect them because, or it's them, or something on those lines.
Yeah, the other thing with the writing skills is they just really need to make sure they use headings as well. So, you know, so if you've got these, they ask you the advantages of zero-based budgeting or the advantages, you know, apply it to the scenario. And they're saying, you know, basically there's 4 marks. Well, you need 4 nice headings, or you need 2 nice headings and 2, you know, and then two sort of at least 2 to 4 sentences to get 2 marks under that. But the heading really helps the marker. It's like they can home in on it. Oh, great. So this is going to be 1 mark, because they've said a heading and they've written underneath that heading. When I see a block of writing, I'm like, no, I'm already bored. I'm already switched off. I can't see the key point. You know, and I'm like, oh no, I'm now going to have to spend 10 more minutes than I would if somebody had given me some headings.
And just to clarify for the viewers as well, am I right in saying that section A and section B are computer-based marked, and then section C is human-based marks, so an actual mark or market?
Yeah, actual mark or mark. And it tends to be, they mark 1 question, I think. So you're getting consistency.
Right,
so they wouldn't, I think, I might get told that this is not right, but I think they would be marking 1 question. So say there was a performance evaluation question out there for the last exam sitting, a person would be marking all of those, or you know, or rather than the whole page, you know, rather than section A, section B, and rather than the 2 section C questions that you got, you would, you know. So and then it gets put together. Yeah. Nice. So therefore there is therefore more likely to be more consistency, and you know, and they're able to discern whether there's a good paper, bad, the follow-through marks. That is the one.
Students, talk me through it.
Yeah, the follow-through marks.
Yours. Go on.
No. So when they're doing Excel, the spreadsheet side, and they're putting in a budget, or they're doing calculation for pricing, or they're doing cost volume profit analysis, break-even point, and all that, and the variances even, they just must make sure that they show their workings either in the cell, or write it out. If, you know, it's up to them. They've just got to make sure that I know that 1 number is being added to another, or 1 number is being taken away. And another top tip, if it is, again, if it's a positive number and it's an income, put it in as a positive. But if it's a cost, put it in as a negative. I know it sounds silly, but if you haven't then labeled things properly, how do I know that you were going to take off? How do I know you were going to take that off? You know, I don't know.
Imagine you're marking it yourself. What would you think?
Yeah, imagine you're marking it yourself. And that, I suppose that is actually quite good. If you've got a study buddy, do something and get them to mark it and see if they can mark it, you know, and that you do the same. it's really good to mark somebody else's. I'm doing it all the time, obviously, but it's good for you as a student to mark somebody else's and see whether, do you understand it, and would you give them the
Yeah.
marks?
Do you follow it through? Does
Yeah.
it look methodical as it goes through?
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
say, oh, what happened here? Well, you took this off. Did you add it back there? And
Well,
then here's your final answer, crystal clear for the marker so they know where it is.
yeah, highlight it. The classic one, it doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be obvious. The classic one was when when my students did my mock, there was this, I'm not going to tell you actually because the next students might get the same one. There was a question and they basically had to use a figure right at the beginning, and let's say that figure was wrong. It was, I'm gonna have to say it's flexing a budget. So they flexed it on the wrong volume. They used the original budgeted volume, not the actual volume.
Okay.
But they then flexed the budget beautifully based on the wrong volume. Well, that was complete follow through marks. And those who didn't show me their calculations for flexing the budget wouldn't have got the follow through marks, but they did. So they lost what, 1 mark for at the most for
The
that.
first figure. Yeah.
The first mistake, and everything else, all the complicated stuff was perfect. It's just, and I was so relieved. I thought, finally they have listened to me. One little mistake was followed all the way through, and they lost 1 mark on that section.
Absolutely spot on. And just to be clear for everyone out there as well, that the follow through marks are based on your own figure. You might see it in your textbooks as well. So in other words, as Joe correctly explained, you may get the first thing wrong at the start, but if you show all your workings as you go through the calculation, whatever it may be, you get all those follow through marks if it's done to the right standard and the right process on there.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's a savior, shall we say? But so don't lose it. Don't lose it by poor workings and poor, exam technique, basically.
It all comes with practice and good notes as you go through, and the more practice and the more questions you do, and I'm going to say as well, the more you get wrong and the more you learn from it, I think the better you are coming into that exam.
Yeah, and again, I think another top tip is, if that's okay, is also when there is something difficult and you don't, you can only do this in section C. When there is something difficult, you're like, I don't understand what price they want me to use. I don't understand what volume they want me to use. Just use a volume. Just use a price. Almost say to it, I am assuming this is the price, and then the marker can't then from then on not give you any marks, because as long as because you lose the mark for that point. It might only be half a mark even that you lose,
Oh, I completely understand where you're coming from, because then if you say, look, I'm going to take the price of £15, then that's 2 or 3 minutes you've not wasted of pondering over what it may be, and then you're working through the process as if it's a normal question rather than dilly-dallying there.
Yeah, never go back and recalculate any ratios either. Never go back. Do it. Make them as, as long as you've shown your workings, again, you'll probably get it marked right, because you've probably done a slip in your calculator, or you've transposed a number. It would still get marked right because you've got your working there, and then you're using that ratio that you've calculated to write about, and they can't penalize you because you're using what you've calculated.
Absolutely spot on. Yeah,
and
your own figure.
Yeah, often there's only, say there's a 20 mark question on ratio analysis and looking at non-performance indicators, non-financial performance indicators and financial. They normally go 20 marks and then they say 4 marks for calculations only. Okay, so in my head I'm thinking, right, I might get some of my calculations wrong, so I've got to make sure I do a good at least 6 calculations with relevance, last year, this year, budget, whatever, benchmark. So I know I'll only get 4, even though I've done 6, but you will definitely get the 4, but don't do too many more because you're wasting time.
Oh, exactly. But that again comes down to question practice as you're going through. You're trying to cover all bases, and then you've got to hit the ground running by answering what the requirement is asking for. That's another area I find with students on the performance management paper, that they'll sometimes answer the question, especially in section C, that they think is the requirement versus what is actually being asked for as well. I don't know if you found that in your experience.
Yeah, what happens is there's a question which just says evaluate the performance of this company based on financial and non-financial indicators. And then they start making recommendations. It said, no, it didn't ask for recommendations. It just said evaluate the performance. So I can't give you any marks in that lovely conclusion where you say, oh, well, I recommend that they put their prices up. That's a waste of time. You've wasted 3 minutes writing that. You know, so it really focus on what it's saying. Yeah. And so another question could be, evaluate using zero-based budgeting for this school, to what extent it should be used. And, you know, and all they've done is then gone, what's the advantages of zero-based budgeting is, and what's the disadvantages are. And there's actually no extent or relevance to the school. Yeah. So you can't give them the mark until they give it relevance to the school. So
really
you've just got to
limiting
write
yourself.
it down and go, but why for the school? You want to think, get that child sat next to you going, why? Why?
Everyone who's got their pen and paper writing down these tips as we go through, I think why will be the main thing for section C going away from today. Good grief. But now, I mean, we're going to have to come to an end sooner or rather than later. But is there anything, final points for the viewers to get down, should we say, that you couldn't live with yourself if you went to bed tonight and you didn't say it to the PM students out there? What are your final thoughts?
Well, I think my final thoughts is to stop thinking that you can question Spot. I get quite down with my students when they do say to me, don't you ever ask me again what's coming up in the exam. I you know, I just can't tell you what's coming up on your exam. So and so I think what you've got to get through to students doing PM is to treat every part of the syllabus with utmost respect and give it your attention. So the classic is the not-for-profit area. It came up as a 20-mark section C, horror of horrors, you know, and if you hadn't looked at not-for-profit, it's just, you know, it was just a
wave the white flag.
The other area students hate of PM is the management systems area, looking at big data and the different types of systems. And again, they don't give that any attention. And, you know, it'll be in your exam. The ACCA have said, you know, it'll be in the exam. And so you've just got to do it. And again, I would say, just because you don't like a subject, again, don't ignore it. Just don't put your head in the sand and go, oh, I just can't get transfer pricing. I just can't get it. You've got to, you know, ask for help, ask for support. Yeah, keep working at it. And actually, the more you do, I know it's silly, but you know, students always quick look, oh, I look at the answer. And that's absolutely fine to look at the answer. But go back 2 weeks later and do that question without looking at the answer and see if you can, and you will be amazed. Repetition does work, but and it will stick. But above all, get support. You know, either it doesn't have to be, you know, don't get support from me. I'm not, you know, telling myself. What I'm saying is find a study buddy, because actually I find sometimes when you don't understand something, I used to get students to explain it who I knew were really good. I'd say, can you explain it to them? And they, first of all, that student would realize they did understand it, and because they were able to explain it. And the second student kind of got it in a different way, you know, because it was explained not in the teacher's way, but in a student's way. Oh, I recognized it. So I think top tips for PM is definitely get a study buddy, and make sure you don't ignore any part of that syllabus, because it'll come up. It'll come up.
Joe, I feel your pain. I get messages about PM all the time, and it goes on the lines of, and please don't have a headache from me saying this, but James, what are the main topics of PM? James, what are the main topics that could come up in the exam of PM? And I just say, look, it's just so wide. You've got to go through it all. You've got to put in the time going through the syllabus, the question practice. The main things that I'm taking away from today that I'd highly recommend people get down. First of all, is time management in the exam. If you don't know on that clock when you've got to move from section A to B to C, whatever way you want to do it, you're going to be at a disadvantage. The second one is the computer-based system and question practice. If before the exam you have not done that computer-based examination practice on ACCA's website, or had practice with providers or Cortex, whatever it may be, you're at a severe disadvantage on there. I would say that's fundamental. And then thirdly, just to reiterate your point, if you've not gone through the full syllabus and given it the credit it deserves, even the areas that you don't particularly like, you've still got to put in the time and the effort, whether that's transfer pricing, management accounting, whatever it is. Because just think to yourself, what if it was one of those little 2 marks that meant a 48 or a 49 versus a 50 or a 51? And just put that into your mind going away from this video to say, I don't want that. And I think that would change your mindset going into PM.
Yeah, totally. And can I just say that one last thing I love to say?
Go for it.
Why? Why? Why?
Tip 4 on there.
Why?
I know.
In fact, put a post-it on your head. Put it on. Just put it.
Well,
No, you know.
That'll be an interesting one for any more PM YouTube videos I do on it. I'll put Y on my. I'll give you a shout out. That'll be it.
Yeah,
But oh, lovely. Well, thank you very much for today, Joe. I must say, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure everyone who's been watching in today has been writing down notes furiously, because I know the value of all the words you said today. I've been absolutely super duper, because watching this video from start to finish, I mean, make sure if you're watching this, as Joe said about having a study buddy, send this video over to them. The tips going through it are definitely going to help them as well. But I've got to say, thank you again, Joe, for coming on as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, well, thank you for having me.
It has been a pleasure, absolute pleasure. Well, guys, as I said, all of Joe's details are in the bottom, in the description of this video below. Feel free to leave any comments down there as well. Joe and I will be more than happy to answer them and to direct you to any other resources on there. And if you have found the video helpful, make sure you give it a massive thumbs up as well. Of course, I mean, how could they not, Joe? I mean, it's been a delight today.
Mostly.
And they've probably got a full page of paper on there out going away. But the final thing I can say is, well, best of luck with your upcoming PM exam. Fingers crossed. And again, let us know in the comments how you get on. But as always on that bombshell, we'll see you next time. Cheers. Thank you very much, Joe.
Bye.
Bye.